Good evening. My name is Mark Guerin. I'm director of the Institute of Politics, and we warmly welcome you to tonight's FAST Forum. This has been a busy summer at the Institute of summer programming, where we bring in elected officials, activists, journalists, those who have deeply committed to the public good. And tonight we're very fortunate to have environmental activists, someone who's spent considerable time and effort in and around civic engagement issues, presidential candidate in this cycle, Mr. Tom Steyer, join us at the forum. So we're excited to welcome him here. He brings his perspective to tonight's conversation with having had a very successful career in business and private equity and hedge fund management. But he also took his life and his turn several years ago to causes that animated his interests in politics, in environmentalism, in voter registration, in reaching out with his very innovative organization, NextGen America, and of course, in his presidential campaign. So we are thrilled to welcome him to the Institute of Politics. He continues his public service, serving in California for Governor Newsom on an important task force that he has on economic recovery in this time. And we welcome you, Tom Steyer, to the Institute of Politics and to the FAST Forum. You are fortunate that our student moderator, Menat is here. She is a rising junior, majoring in economics and government and Arabic. She is the director of special projects at the Institute of Politics and also president of the Harvard College Democrats. I should say, Tom, that you share some things in common. You're both Democrats, as is evident. You both attended the same high school, Phillips Exeter. But alas, Menat came to Harvard and you attended Yale. So, but we warmly welcome you. Menat, thank you very much for your leadership at the Institute of Politics. I will turn it over to you to moderate, and welcome again to tonight's FAST Forum.
Amazing. Thank you so much for the wonderful introduction, Mark. Thank you, Tom, for being here with us today. So let's just get into it. Let's talk about the state of the world today. We've seen through this pandemic that this public health issue has disproportionately affected communities of color as well as poor communities. The same goes for climate change, an issue that you've worked really hard to combat. So what steps can a government, for example, take to mitigate this inequality?
Well, let me say, Menat, that we have systemic racism in our society, and it's really been there since the beginning, even before the Constitution. And it's something which is, when we think about combating it, I think that we have to take the broadest possible view. And so when I was running for president, I was talking every single day, including to all white audiences who may have been a little befuddled about why I was dwelling on this, about systemic racism and the need for a true retelling of American history and reparations for the descendants of slaves. And so when we look, you brought up both the COVID epidemic, which is being disproportionately borne by Black and brown people, both in terms of health, but also in terms of employment and jobs, and climate change, which is associated inextricably with environmental injustice, the fact that this society has put its pollution, has concentrated its pollution in communities of color across the nation for as long as anyone can remember. So when we think about how to redo that, and the task force very much that I'm co-chairing in California on economic recovery has in its basic mission that we be looking through a lens of racial, environmental, and economic justice, virtually every single policy has to be looked at in the context of repairing damage and injustice that's been done. So when you think about, I'll just take climate for a second. Politically, for over a decade, as I've worked on climate, I've believed and have tried to enact that any time we have a climate issue, it starts with environmental justice. It starts with the people in that community, leadership from that community. And if you get clean air and clean water right, and you get leadership from Black and brown communities where kids have asthma disproportionately, where people get sick from drinking the water out of the tap, you will get your climate policy right too. And let me say that as somebody who's been working for Joe Biden since I stopped running for president myself, he is someone who understands this, who gets environmental justice. And if you look at the climate plan he put out a week ago, Tuesday, very much comes with a lens of environmental justice and job creation. So I think this is, in order, if you want to combat hundreds of years of systemic racism, then that is a lens that you have to bring to every single issue of inequality. And you also have to talk about retelling the history and what reparations would look like.
Absolutely. So in addition to those items that will help, I know that you've spent an enormous amount of time with NextGen, for example, all sorts of other progress and resources that you've put toward progressive causes. In addition, your philanthropy. So we'd love to hear a little bit more about what the philosophy behind your philanthropy is. Do others agree with it? How can we push for more people to give even just fractions of their own wealth to important causes, especially while we start to know a little bit more about the increasing wealth gap, and inequality that's been on the rise in the US?
Well, Menat, the funny thing is, I don't think of myself as a philanthropist, and I don't believe that the things that I've done really fit into a traditional concept of philanthropy, which is basically, giving money to institutions doing good, although I have done that. Mm-hmm. The things that I've really tried to focus on, NextGen is about registering, engaging, and empowering young voters, people between 18 and 35. Your generation, I'm talking to a rising junior in college. People between 18 and 35 are the biggest, most diverse generation in American history. I mean, I know it includes millennials and Gen Z, vote at half the rate of other Americans, are the most progressive and diverse group. And to the extent that you turn out, that the Harvard undergrads, the Harvard grad students, and your peers across the country turn out, it changes every single election. So that's something where, is that philanthropy, or is that trying to enable other people to push power to someone else? Kat Taylor, who is a graduate of Harvard College, and I started a community bank 15 years ago based on the ideas of economic justice, environmental sustainability, and supporting businesses owned by women and people of color. It's a bank. We have FDIC insurance. We have to make money to please the FDIC. The money's held in a foundation, but we measure the impact on the community as well as having to settle the FDIC that we're not going to go bankrupt. So is that a philanthropy? Because to me, every single loan is measured. Does it create jobs in the community? Does it empower female owners and people of color? Does it sequester carbon? Every single loan has to have a positive impact, or at worst be neutral. We had to develop our own measure. That's not traditional philanthropy. That's somehow an activity where we're measuring positive results. And we also started a ranch to show that you can raise animals in a way that net sequesters a great deal of carbon, and therefore, does something towards climate. And to try and, we think we've impacted 2.4 million acres in California to raise animals in a more, systemically holistic and organic way. So I don't think of those as traditional philanthropies, because I think they're all subject to some form of measurement and market, so that if they don't work, if we don't register anybody, it's kind of like, okay, that was a big flop. If our loans don't get paid back, or if they don't impact the community in a positive way, that's a big flop. And we have scientists measuring how much carbon we're sequestering. If it turns out that the way we're doing it doesn't work, that's a big flop. So we're much more interested in participation and engagement than what I would think of as traditional philanthropy, although I believe some money has gone to Harvard University.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Tom. All right, we have a few minutes to take some questions from those tuning in from home. So our first question will be from Ryan Gaharawala. I hope I said that correctly.
Yeah, Gaharawala, sorry, 1 second.
No problem.
Awesome. Hi, Tom. Thanks so much for being here today. I'm really excited to hear you speak. I have a two-part question. The first part is, what do you think is the single most critical thing that Joe Biden needs to do to engage people, increase voter turnout, and win the the election this fall. And I think the second part is what type of, in the fact that we're currently in the COVID-19 pandemic, what are the like newest and most exciting opportunities that virtual organizing presents to us?
Okay. So let me take those questions in order, Ryan. In terms of Joe Biden, look, I think the issue with Joe Biden is that even though he's been around in Washington, D.C. at senior level for decades, there are plenty of Americans who really don't know him. And I think when my experience and part of what I've been trying to do since I stopped running myself was to get him in front of as many people as possible so they can see who he is and can see really where he's coming from. And so, for instance, in terms of environmental justice or climate or traditional environmentalists, he has really progressed. If you look at that policy platform he put out last Tuesday, it's very, very progressive. I mean, it's 100% clean electricity generation by 2035. It's $2 trillion in the first 4 years. It's 100% net zero carbon by 2050. It's very, very strong.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what you get to see when you talk to him is that he's a guy who really relates all policy through human beings. So the thing that this is a huge priority for him, but it's a huge priority from the standpoint of cleaning up the air and water in Black and brown communities, seeing kids be healthier, creating jobs for working people and working families. And so to me, the big thing is there's a really great reason to vote for this guy. I think this guy is going to be a great healer and a transformative president. And I think people need to see that. In terms of virtual organizing, so let me say, NextGen is the biggest youth voter mobilization effort in American history. In 2018, we were on 421 campuses in 11 swing states. We went into 38 districts. We more than doubled the turnout of young people. 33 of them went to Democrats. I'm a huge believer in turnout. I believe that the people who are on this call know who they would vote for if they vote. To me, the question is not, how are you going to vote? The question is whether you're going to vote, particularly if you're under 35. One statistic, highest turnout ever for people under 30 is 52% in a presidential year. That's a terrible number, you guys. Think about it. The election of your lifetime, transformative, a gigantic fork in the road for America. 52% decided it was important enough to vote. We're going to work really hard so that young people vote at a higher rate, make their numbers felt, make your voices heard, and really change this whole country for the better. So we went 100% virtual on March 10th. We were on 421 campuses. We had ambitious goals on how many campuses we're going to be on. The answer is 0. Everything we're going to do has been virtual. We think that we're going to have more impact than ever. If you want to be doing virtual canvassing, guess what? People under 35, come on, that's our chance. Yeah. And that's what we've seen so far, Ryan, is that our ability to organize virtually under these circumstances is going to be the most impactful canvas and organizing we've ever done. And I'll give you an example. One day next week, we have a big volunteer base. We're going to send out 2.5 million texts. In 2016, I think we've sent out a total of 11 million texts. So in one day, we're going to do a quarter of the texts that we did last time. We did 10,000 phone calls in Michigan 2 nights ago. And I was talking to the head and I said, well, you should put that out. That's a gigantic number of volunteers on the phone. And he goes, that's a low number for us. We're going to beat that by a mile next week, Tom. I don't want to put out the low numbers. So I'm just saying, for young people, think about you and your friends. Being organized virtually is kind of, ho-hum. You can organize other people. You can be organized. This is the year for you guys. This is the year for the millennials and the Gen Z people, most diverse group, most progressive group in America, to show up and take over and change the course of this country in a historic change with the highest turnout ever. That's what I believe is going to happen. And that's what we're working for at NextGen.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you for your question, Ryan. The next question is from Devon Edwards.
Hi there, Tom. I really enjoyed watching your presidential campaign, and I appreciated your focus on climate change, including elevating it on the debate stage. How do we address the massive levels of skepticism involving the science behind global warming, although climate scientists around the globe have such wide agreement on the vast majority of tenets involving climate change? Thank you so much.
So is it Devon or Devon?
It's Devon.
Devon, okay.
Yeah.
So let me say this. I don't think there's as much skepticism as you would believe from reading the press. I think our research says that large majorities of Republicans know it's happening, know it's human cause, and are in favor of clean energy. Honest to goodness, I think from a information and objective standpoint, this debate is over. It's dead over. And it's, what I like to say is we've won the argument, but we certainly haven't won the fight. Because there is, I think the last number I heard was 1/3 of Republican donations are fossil fuel donations. So, we can be right. It can be critical to the lives and livelihoods of every single American. We still need to win the fight. And so I think in your generation, this is probably, it's either the number 1 or number 2 issue for young people. It is a critical issue across this country. I believe, look, the Republican voters want clean energy. They don't want all the terrible things to happen. And they're really, the level of science denial. I mean, one of the things I'd say to you is this: when is the last time you heard a Republican politician make an objective argument against climate? They don't do it because they can't do it because it's so preposterous. What they do is vote the wrong way. What they do is put in coal lobbyists to run the EPA. They put it, they do a whole bunch of things to enable and subsidize fossil fuels at the expense of clean energy. But it's all surreptitious. It's never cleanly defined. They won't engage because they can't. And so we need to, that's why the Biden plan, it's so critical to have a transformative plan to hook it up to job creation, organized labor, environmental justice, to make this a big, broad movement that is people focused, that works for Americans now, but also solves our long-term problem and lets us bring the rest of the world along. Last thing I'll say is this: the technology is further ahead than anyone would have guessed 6 months ago. So the news from the natural world is rotten, but our ability to deal with that news is not only the best it's ever been, it's better than anyone would have guessed. So it really is a question of what are we willing to do politically to make it happen.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking my question.
Devin, thank you.
Thanks, Devin, for your question. And our next question will be from Victor.
Hello, my name is Victor. I'm a rising sophomore at the college studying government and environmental science and public policy. My question is, you have said that climate change is the biggest crisis and also the biggest opportunity. With Biden's plan finally being a bit more clarified or elaborated upon, we have former opponents for the presidential campaign this time around, like Governor Inslee, call it visionary. In what ways do you believe the plan appropriately addresses the crisis and truly seizes the opportunities that you've discussed before, especially seeing as there are some stark contrasts between Biden's plan and what you've proposed in the past?
Well, actually, it's funny because I look at that plan, it looks pretty close to what I was talking about, to be honest, Victor. I mean, what he's talking about is spending a lot of money on infrastructure, $2 trillion, to basically provide the backbone for people to hook into so we can move to clean energy generation. He's also talking about changing our transportation very dramatically, including clean rail, clean transit, but also moving very fast to electric vehicles away from internal combustion engines. He's setting out, a huge building program. And so when you step back and think about this is a human plan. And I keep saying this. This is a plan that comes from environmental justice and cleaning up air and water in Black and brown communities. It's also a labor plan. This is a jobs plan, specifically talking not just about creating millions of jobs, well-paid, unionized jobs, but also protecting people in declining industries. And Joe Biden is somebody who really cares about that. So this is very much a human-driven plan, but let me take a step back and talk about it conceptually. Look, when you think about what you want to do in climate, there are three things that people always talk about, and then there's the fourth thing that you actually need to do. It's like, clean up your electricity generation, because there's no point of plugging an electric vehicle into a socket that's powered by coal. Clean up your electricity generation, electrify everything, get as efficient as possible in your energy use. That's basically the concept of what you're going to do. But if you're an American, and if you're an American president, like I hope that Joe Biden will be, you've got to do those three things. And then you've got to go to the rest of the world and talk to them about how we're going to do this together. Because we're 15% of greenhouse gas emissions, the rest of the world is 85%. The technology may be great here. Who says it's available there? So there's got to be a foreign policy global perspective of taking what's possible here and our commitment to do the right thing to every other country in the world, and partnering with them and making it possible and making it attractive for them to do exactly what we're doing. Because if we're perfect and the rest of the world keeps going the way it's going, they sink us too.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Victor, for your question. We have one more question for you, Tom. So today and every day, we honor the late John Lewis, and he used to describe our country as well as our world as a house that we all share. Where do you think our house is headed, and what do you think the future of our world looks like?
So I agree with you, Menat, in the sense of honoring John Lewis. And, he's somebody who was value-driven, consistently effective, consistently brave, consistently. But let me say, the African-American community has been providing moral leadership to this country, not just for decades, not just for as long as John Lewis was around, but for generations and centuries. And I view the kind of leadership that he provided, which I have immense respect for and honor, as part of a chain of leadership coming from the African-American community, continuing today. I don't think that it is at all, surprising that in fact we have a huge issue about racial justice this year, that the Black Lives Matter movement is impacting people across the country and across the globe into a real reflection about equality and equity and justice. And so what kind of house do we have? Look, we have a choice. I mean, I know, Menat, you're a Democrat and I'm a Democrat. I started the impeachment movement. I have a very strong opinion about what's at stake this year. We've talked a lot about climate. The UN has said we have 9 years to save the planet. The UN has always been, in my mind, had rose-colored glasses when they came to talking about climate. If they give a range, the worst thing that they think could happen is actually what happens. Right. And they're saying 9 years. We don't have 4 years to waste for sure. Mm-hmm. So that's definitely out there to be considered. But the second thing is, look, our democracy is under threat. There is something going on here where, in my mind, there's a systemic, organized, intentional attempt to subvert our democracy. It starts with striking African Americans from the rolls. Mm-hmm. Not a minor thing. Hundreds of thousands of people determining elections. The one I like to quote is Wisconsin 2016, Wisconsin, not the Deep South.
Right.
200,000 African Americans struck from the rolls. Trump won by 23,000 votes.
Right.
So that's part of it.
Mm.
The attempt to, but then the attempt to prevent vote by mail, the attempt to recruit poll watchers to prevent massive cheating, which has never been shown to have even minor cheating.
Right.
You know, there is a consistent effort. We're watching what's going on now in Portland, which they want to take to Chicago, and they want to take to Albuquerque. And there is a consistent undermining of democratic, institutions, democratic understandings and faith. There is the president saying he's not sure if he'll accept the election.
Right.
There's the president encouraging the Russians to hack the DNC and release the information. There's a consistent attack on democracy itself. There's a really interesting article today, I thought. Now, I am a Democrat, but it was saying this administration is not conservative. Mm. This administration is authoritarian. Mm-hmm. And it's very different. They're actually hell-bent on destroying our institutions. They're actually not people trying to preserve institutions and build up institutions. It's very much of a destructive act. That's why I started the impeachment movement. I mean, I felt that he was a criminal who was attacking our democracy, putting himself ahead of the American people, and that he would get worse every single day from then on. And when people say, isn't it unbelievable? I'm saying, it's not unbelievable at all. Today's the best day of the rest of his presidency.
Right.
So when I look at this year and I think about the House, we have a choice. We can rebuild and refurbish our House in a spirit of equity and inclusion, accepting science, dealing with objective reality, and treating every person equally or not. And that to me is a gigantic fork in the road. That's why I'm saying, I look to your generation to show up. I believe we'll have the highest turnout in American history this year. And I think we have to, because people have to understand that the planet's at stake, the democracy is at stake. Our health is at stake, for goodness sakes. If you've watched exactly what the federal government has done in response to a pandemic, oh my goodness, I mean, we don't have enough time to go into this. So to me, that's why I'm all in. I'm all in for Joe Biden, because I think he's a great choice. And I think it's not just we need to avoid the bad turn. We have a great choice there. Mm-hmm. And I think we have a chance to elect really good people, new senators, and have a complete change there. And I think we have a census year, which means that there's reapportionment in the Congress, where Republican gerrymandering is responsible apparently for 27 out of 435 seats, and also in state legislatures across the country. So this year is it's 1932, it's 1860, it's 1980. We have to turn the page. And we don't, and if we don't, I think we are in crisis the day after the election.
Right.
And I think we have never seen this stark a choice between candidates. And we are lucky to have a very good candidate who I think is, if you look, you'll see, he's not just a healer. He's not just someone with a lot of compassion who cares. He's also somebody who's very progressive. And I think we'll have a transformative presidency. I think we need one. And I think we're going to get one.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for chatting with us, Tom. Your insights are invaluable, even though you're a Yale Bulldog at heart. We're so excited to have you as part of our community and hope to talk to you soon. Thank you, Mark, for a wonderful introduction and for your leadership of the IOP, and to all of you tuning at home. Thanks for joining us. And if you had a wonderful time listening to Tom chat with us today, please join us at our last Fast Forum of the summer next week on July 30th at 6 p.m. with Governor Larry Hogan. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you all later.
Menat and Mark, thank you so much for having me. It's so much fun.
Absolutely, Tom.